Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It happened in the living room. Our living room, bathed in late afternoon sun like nothing bad could possibly happen there. Lisa stood at the edge of the coffee table, her hands on her hips, eyes colder than I'd ever seen them. The windows were open, a breeze flirting with the curtains, but inside, it felt suffocating. She said it like she was reading from a script. "I'm leaving you, Jacob. There's someone else. And frankly, I think we're both better off." I didn't move, didn't blink. I just stared at her, at the woman I'd built 10 years of my life around, while she dropped a bomb like she was commenting on the weather. "Okay," I said simply, pulling open the drawer in the side table. I took out a manila envelope and handed it to her. She frowned. "What's this?" "Divorce papers. Signed. You're free." Lisa blinked. Her lips parted in surprise for a beat before she forced out a scoff. "You think this scares me? That I'll fall apart because you beat me to the paperwork?" I shook my head, lips curling just a little. Not a smile, not quite. "No, not at all. I just figured you'd want a head start on your new life." She threw the envelope onto the couch. "You're pathetic, Jacob. You really think you can just check out this easy?" "Is this about Brad?" I asked casually, tilting my head. That name landed like a slap. "What?" she said too fast. I let the silence stretch between us. Then I added, calmly, "Is this the guy I hired last week?" Her eyebrows knit together in confusion. "Hired? What are you talking about?" I shrugged. "You didn't think I'd notice the late-night calls? The perfume that wasn't yours? The receipts you forgot to hide?" Lisa's face drained of color. "You're bluffing. Brad Jensen. Marketing. New hire. I signed off on his background check myself." She took a step back, mouth opening, then closing. Like her brain couldn't quite catch up. "I thought he was interviewing," she muttered. "He was. Until I offered him a contract." Her eyes darted to the envelope on the couch, then back to me. "You knew? I watched you circle the drain," I said, my voice quiet now. "And I let you. I wanted to see how far you'd go." Lisa tried to recover, folding her arms. "This doesn't change anything. You can't intimidate me with office politics." "I'm not trying to," I said, leaning against the back of the couch. "I just find it interesting, the man you risked our marriage for. He reports to me now." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. "Checkmate, huh?" I added. Lisa turned, grabbed her purse, and stormed toward the bedroom, probably to keep packing. Her steps were loud, deliberate, but she didn't say another word. I sat down in the armchair, loosened my tie, and stared out the window. Funny how betrayal doesn't burn when you see it coming. It just confirms what you already knew. Some people don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. I'm Jacob, and up until this afternoon, I thought I was the predictable one in our marriage. But that was before she learned I was already 2 moves ahead. The house was too quiet. That kind of silence doesn't come from peace. It comes from absence. And absence is loud in its own way. It echoes. It clings. It reminds you of all the things that used to be there. I sat at the kitchen counter, the same spot I always did every morning. The coffee was still warm, but I hadn't touched it. Just sat there, hands wrapped around the mug like it could anchor me to something that made sense. From down the hall, I could hear the muffled sound of drawers opening and closing, Lisa packing. That part wasn't theatrical anymore. She'd stopped throwing looks my way or muttering jabs under her breath. No more posturing, just the sound of zippers and hangers clinking against metal. She wasn't rushing either. No panic, no regret, just deliberate movement. Like this was a plan she'd rehearsed. That part stung more than I expected. A soft shuffle behind me broke the silence. Lisa appeared in the doorway, suitcase in one hand, tote bag in the other. She looked like herself. Maybe that was the strangest part. No tears, no trace of what we were, just the polished version of the woman I once knew. "I'm going," she said. I looked up at her, but didn't move. I figured. She stood there, waiting for something. Maybe expecting me to ask her to stay. Maybe waiting for a fight. But I didn't give her either. "I left your laptop charger on the hallway table," I said instead. Her eyebrows twitched just slightly, surprised, maybe disappointed. "That's it?" she asked. "You're just gonna let me go?" I nodded. "You've been gone for a while, Lisa. Today's just the paperwork." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, with that signature scoff I'd memorized over the years, she muttered, "You think this makes you strong? Being passive?" I raised my eyes to hers. "No, I think it makes me free." Something flickered across her face, like she was hearing a language she didn't speak. I thought you'd at least feel something, she said, half under her breath. I do, I answered quietly. Just not for you. She didn't like that. I saw her lips pressed tight, shoulders tense. But she didn't argue, didn't cry. She just picked up her bags and turned away. A minute later, the front door opened, closed, and then nothing. No footsteps, no tension, just that silence again. Heavier now. I stayed in that chair for another hour, maybe longer. My coffee had gone cold by then, still untouched. I should have felt relief. I should have felt strong, triumphant even. But instead, I felt something quieter, not pain, not sadness, just a kind of weight. Betrayal has a weird way of settling into your bones. It doesn't scream. It lingers. I thought of the 10 years, the holidays, the fights, the forgiveness that always came too easily. I thought about all the times I looked away because I wanted to believe we were still good. And I thought about Brad, the man she chose over everything we built, the man I now employed. I closed my eyes and let the silence speak. For a second, I questioned whether I should let her walk away so easily, whether she deserved to feel even a fraction of what she'd done to me, whether I should make her pay. But then I opened my eyes and looked around at the clean counters, the morning lights spilling over the tile, the stillness. No screaming, no lies, no games. There was something powerful about peace. Still, something tugged at me from the edges of that calm. Not rage, but unease. A quiet voice whispering that letting go didn't have to mean forgiving. That silence didn't have to mean surrender. She thought she had won. She hadn't realized I'd already started playing my move. But for now, I chose to sit still, in this quiet, in this new beginning, and breathe. The game had changed, and I was just getting warmed up. It was the kind of bar where the music never got too loud, where the lights stayed low enough that no one felt the need to pretend they were fine. That's probably why I liked it. I hadn't been there in years. But that night, the wood-paneled walls, the familiar scent of whiskey and leather, and the hum of quiet conversations made it feel like the only place I could go without having to fake anything. Marcus was already there, sitting in our old corner booth. He always came early, even when we were younger, said it gave him time to observe the room. Said it was a habit he picked up after his divorce. I slid into the booth across from him, my jacket still damp from the drizzle outside. Jacob, he said, raising his glass just slightly. Didn't expect the text. I nodded. Didn't expect to send it. Marcus leaned back, took a slow sip of his whiskey, and studied me like I was some kind of specimen under glass. You look like someone who just saw the end of something important and didn't flinch. That's about right, I said. There was a silence. Not awkward, not heavy. Just two men letting words come when they were ready. She's gone. Marcus finally asked. I nodded once. Packed up this morning. Walked out without so much as a backward glance. He let out a low whistle, then grinned grimly. Did you tell her you knew about Brad? Didn't have to. She figured it out when I asked if her new man liked reporting to me. Marcus choked a laugh into his glass. Oh man, you didn't. Straight-faced, I said. Watched her realize the ceiling wasn't as high as she thought. He shook his head, smirking. I always said you had a quiet way of twisting the knife. I shrugged. I wasn't trying to twist. Just hand it back to her. But you're not mad? He asked, his tone changing slightly. No fury, no broken dishes or whiskey bottle through the wall. I met his eyes. I thought about it. I really did. But I guess what hit me harder than the betrayal was how little I felt when it finally happened. Like, she wasn't mine to lose anymore. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, then leaned in. You remember that 4th of July party, 3 years ago? The one at Keller's Lake House? I nodded slowly. Yeah, you brought that girl who hated fireworks. He chuckled. Yeah, bad date. But I remember something else. He paused, then added, I remember seeing Lisa in the kitchen, with Brad. That name again. What about them? I asked, my voice still steady. Marcus's tone dropped. He had his hand on her lower back, just long enough that it wasn't friendly, and she didn't flinch, didn't move away. My stomach didn't twist the way it should have. That should have made me angry. But instead, I just felt the weight of confirmation. She was already halfway out the door back then. I muttered. Marcus nodded. And you were out on the deck, passing out beers like it was the happiest day of your life. I took a sip of my drink, let the silence settle between us again. She humiliated you, Jacob, he said finally. Not just in private. Not just at the end. For years. And you wore it like armor, pretending it didn't dig under your skin. I didn't speak. Now I'm not saying throw her life in a blender, he continued. But if there's a man who deserves to walk away with his dignity, and maybe just a little bit of poetic balance, it's you. I turned the glass slowly in my hand, watching the ice melt. I've been thinking, I said after a moment. Maybe peace doesn't mean letting someone off the hook. Maybe peace is just not screaming when you get even. Marcus gave a short laugh. Now that sounds more like you. He raised his glass again. To clean hands and cold revenge. I clinked mine against his. To quiet fires. He sat back, satisfied. The waitress came by, and we ordered another round. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Sometimes the right conversation doesn't roar, it simmers. And by the time I stepped back into the cold night air, I knew one thing for sure. Letting Lisa walk away was never the real decision. It was what came after that would matter. And something inside me had just shifted. Not rage. Just clarity. The office always smelled like old coffee and new toner. Clean, quiet, efficient. I'd built this place over 10 years, and by now, I could walk its halls with my eyes closed and still feel everything that mattered. That morning, I arrived early. Earlier than usual. The air outside was crisp, but inside, it was sharp, purposeful. I greeted the front desk, passed the break room, nodded at a few department heads. Everyone noticed my mood, calm, as always, but there was something different. A stillness under the surface. I made it to my office, slipped my coat onto the stand, and sat at my desk without turning on the light. I didn't need light for this. By 9:17, Brad had clocked in. I heard his voice from across the hall. Too loud, too casual. He always sounded like a guy who was trying to sound like he belonged. I picked up the phone and dialed his extension. Jacob, he answered, too fast. Hey, Brad, I said evenly. Could you step into my office for a moment? Just a quick chat. A pause. Then, sure thing, boss. I watched him through the glass. He smoothed his shirt, checked his hair in the dark screen of his phone, then walked over like he was heading into a team-building exercise. He knocked once. Come in, I said, gesturing to the seat across from me. Brad smiled, nervous but trying to play it off. Everything all right? Absolutely, I replied. I just like to check in with newer team members once they've had time to settle in. You've been here, what? A month now? Just over 3 weeks, he said, sitting down and folding his hands in his lap. Right. And how's it been so far? Good, he nodded. Really good. Everyone's been helpful, and I appreciate the opportunity to grow here. His words sounded like they were pulled from a LinkedIn post. I leaned forward, my voice even. That's good to hear. You know, we value discipline here. Not just deadlines, but discretion. Professionalism. Brad's eyes twitched, just a little. Of course, he said quickly. I've always believed that what happens outside these walls is your business. But when the outside starts seeping in, well, that's when it becomes mine. His throat moved as he swallowed. I'm not sure I follow, he said, but the smile was gone. I offered a small shrug. Let's keep it simple. I expect you to be focused here. Laser focused. Personal entanglements have a way of interfering with that, especially when they involve complicated dynamics. His gaze dropped to the edge of my desk. I assure you, my personal life won't affect my performance. Good, I said, standing up. Because performance is everything here. And I'd hate to see someone with potential sabotage himself for reasons that don't belong in this building. He stood too, but slower. Understood. Glad we had this talk, I said, holding out my hand. Brad shook it, his palm already damp. Same here. As he stepped out, I noticed the glances exchanged between the employees nearby. They'd heard my tone, felt the shift. They didn't know the story, but Brad did, and that was enough. Back in my chair, I allowed myself one breath of satisfaction. He'd walked in confident. He walked out shaken. Not a word had been raised. But the message had landed, quietly, precisely, exactly where it needed to. It was just past 7 when the doorbell rang. Not a polite ring. A hard press. Long accusatory. I didn't rush. I finished rinsing my plate, set it in the rack, and dried my hands slowly. Whoever it was already knew I was home. That kind of ringing always does. When I opened the door, Lisa was standing there like a storm that had lost its way. Her hair was pulled back too tight. Her coat wasn't buttoned. Her eyes were sharp, wild, burning with something that looked a lot like panic. What did you do? She snapped, stepping inside without waiting for permission. I closed the door behind her. Calm. Unbothered. Good evening to you too. Don't play dumb, she shot back, dropping her bag onto the chair. Brad just called me. He's freaking out. I raised an eyebrow. About? You know exactly about what, she said, pacing now. You dragged him into your office. You intimidated him. You're messing with his job just to get back at me. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms loosely. Lisa, I had a professional conversation with an employee. That's literally my job. She laughed, sharp and humorless. Oh, please. You expect me to believe this is a coincidence? I tilted my head. You expect me to believe his anxiety is my responsibility? She stopped pacing and pointed at me. You're doing this on purpose. You're punishing him because of us. I smiled faintly. Not wide. Just enough. That must make it even harder for you, I said. Her face froze. What did you just say? I repeated it, same calm tone. If your personal life is tied up with his professional performance, yeah, that sounds complicated. Her voice jumped an octave. You don't get to do this, Jacob. You don't get to act like some calm, righteous boss while you're clearly abusing your position. I shrugged. I haven't mentioned your name once. Or his. Or anything personal. Funny how nervous he got anyway. She shook her head, hands trembling now. He can't sleep. He thinks he's going to lose his job. I met her eyes. Is that my fault? Yes, she shouted. Because you know he needs that job. You know that. I stepped closer, not threatening, not loud, just present. And you knew I was his employer before you decided to play house with him. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying the honesty, I replied. It's new. She scoffed. You think you've won something? You think this makes you powerful? I glanced around the room. Quiet, clean, still mine. No, I think it makes things balanced. Lisa let out a shaky breath, running a hand through her hair. You're not like this. You never were. I smiled again. You never looked closely. She stepped back, eyes darting like she was recalculating everything. You're doing this to scare him. No, I said softly. I'm letting him scare himself. Silence stretched between us. Thick, uncomfortable. Finally, she grabbed her bag. You're sick. I opened the door for her. Drive safe. She hesitated at the threshold, glaring like she wanted to say more, like she wanted to wound me. But she didn't. The door slammed behind her. I locked it, turned off the hallway light, and stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet settle back into place. She thought she was watching me unravel. What she didn't realize was that she was the one losing her footing. And Brad was just starting to understand the ground beneath him wasn't solid at all. It was 9:18 a.m. when Brad finally walked through the glass doors of the office. Not a dramatic entrance. Not flustered like someone who'd sprinted and apologizing. He tried to walk in normal, calm, casual, but the effect didn't land. He looked like someone coming back from a sleepless war. I watched from the hallway window outside my office, coffee in hand. He paused near the elevator, scanned the room, then moved toward his desk like the floor might collapse beneath him. His shoulders were hunched tighter than his jacket. He didn't greet anyone, and no one greeted him back. That was new. It's strange how fast silence spreads in a workplace. Just 2 or 3 side glances, a half-whisper behind a coffee mug, and suddenly, everyone knows something is wrong, even if they don't know what it is. I walked into the break room mid-morning to refill my coffee. Conversation died the second I stepped in. A few employees nodded awkwardly. One cleared his throat and walked out with his water bottle half full. Only Lauren, our senior analyst, stayed. She gave me a curious glance. Everything all right, sir? She asked, polite. Why wouldn't it be? I replied, pouring the coffee slowly. She hesitated, then smiled. Just seems tense this week. Probably the weather, I said, giving nothing away. She didn't press. Smart woman. Back at my desk, I pulled up the attendance report. Our system tracked check-ins by the minute. Brad, 9:18 a.m. Our policy was clear. Anything after 9:10 without prior notice counted as a tardy. No emotion, no drama. Just structure. I opened the HR portal and logged the infraction. Subject, tardy, formal notice employee, Brad Jensen date. Today, notes. Late arrival without prior notification. First formal warning issued in accordance with Employee Handbook Policy, Section 3(7). No commentary. No color. I clicked submit. 2 minutes later, my office phone rang. It was Brad. Hey, Jacob? His voice was tight, too polite. Yes, I just got an email. About a tardy warning? That's correct, I said. You arrived after the acceptable window today. Policy requires formal documentation. He was quiet for a second. Then, right. I guess I didn't realize we were that strict about it. We are, I said flatly. It's all in the handbook. Of course, he muttered. There was traffic and Brad. I interrupted, not harsh, just firm. I don't need an explanation. You've received a warning, not a termination. It's simply procedure. Let's not make it personal. A long pause. Then, understood. I hung up first. No satisfaction. No smirk. Just order. An hour later, I passed the break room again. Brad was inside, hunched over a coffee he wasn't drinking. 2 interns walked in, saw him, then immediately walked back out, whispering. He noticed. I could tell by the way he didn't look up. There's a special kind of discomfort that lives in places people used to feel safe in. He'd thought he was untouchable here. Now, he was realizing just how fragile his seat really was. And I hadn't even raised my voice. 2 weeks passed. Quiet ones on the surface. But the silence around Brad had evolved. It wasn't just awkward anymore. It was avoidance. People stopped copying him on emails. Stopped asking for input. They tiptoed around him like he was already halfway out the door. Then came the mistake. It was a Thursday. Mid-quarter financials were being finalized, clients waiting on reports. Our team had prepped everything ahead of time, except the final portfolio documents from Brad's department. I was in a conference call when my assistant knocked gently and slipped me a note. Brad lost the client files. They were due an hour ago. I excused myself from the call, stood, and walked straight down the hall. Brad was at his desk, typing furiously. When he saw me, he shot up like someone caught stealing. Jacob, I was just office. Now. The floor was dead silent as he followed me. Inside, I closed the door and gestured to the chair. I didn't sit. Neither did he. You had one responsibility this morning, I said quietly. Where are the documents for South Ridge? I had them, I swear. I printed them, but I must have left them in the copier room, or I raised a hand. He stopped talking. This is a $1, $2 million quarterly partner, Brad. We've been cultivating them for 6 years. He swallowed hard. I know. I was just moving fast, and I walked behind my desk, finally sitting. Calm, as always. I'm placing a performance penalty on your file, I said, unlocking the HR portal again. Failure to deliver critical assets within deadline. Financial fine, 15% of your quarterly bonus. His jaw twitched. But, Jacob, please, I need that bonus. Rent's coming up, and you lost sensitive documents, I replied. This isn't personal. It's accountability. He stepped closer, eyes wide. I'm under a lot right now, all right? You know why? Just cut me some slack. I won't let it happen again. I looked up at him. Not angry. Just steady. I'll think about keeping you. Those 5 words hit harder than any threat. His face crumbled. Don't fire me, he said suddenly, voice cracking. Please. I'm doing my best. Lisa, this whole thing I'm just trying to hold on. I leaned back in my chair. So am I. He blinked rapidly. You don't need to do this. Brad, I said softly, I haven't done anything. You've done it all. He stood frozen, breathing heavy like he might cry, but held it back. Can I fix this? I tapped the screen. Start by reprinting those documents. Bring them to my desk in 20 minutes. And Brad, he looked up, fragile. Triple check the copies before you walk out of that room. He nodded quickly and turned to leave. His hands shook as he reached for the doorknob. I didn't watch him walk out. I just opened his HR file and added the penalty. No commentary. Just a timestamp and a line of truth. It wasn't personal, but it was precise. And if Brad was smart, he was beginning to understand something very simple. This was a professional minefield. And he'd wandered in without a map. The office was quiet again. It was always like this after a storm. The kind of hush that settles when everyone's watching, waiting for what comes next. Phone still rang. Emails still landed. But there was a hum beneath it all, a current of silent speculation. I sat at my desk, blinds half closed, the late afternoon light casting long, sharp shadows across the floor. Brad had submitted the reprinted South Ridge files 27 minutes after I dismissed him. Not 20, not 30, 27. And I didn't say a word about it. I read through the papers slowly. Every number, every attachment. They were accurate. Polished. Almost too polished. That's the thing about desperation. People start overcorrecting. I reached for my keyboard and opened Brad's employee record again. There it was, 2 warnings. One for tardiness. One for mishandling sensitive materials. Enough for HR to raise a brow. Not enough to fire him. Not yet. I clicked Add Record and entered a note. Second infraction recorded within a 2-week span. Pattern emerging. Monitoring ongoing. No escalation recommended at this time. Then I paused. Fired? That would be easy. Obvious. And it wouldn't teach him a thing. But letting him feel the pressure, that slow, unrelenting tightening around his career, that was the lesson. Brad came into this job like it was just a stepping stone. Like he could flirt his way into influence, gamble a marriage, and still land upright. Like actions didn't ripple past bedroom doors. He'd gambled on Lisa. She had power in their affair. But I had position in his life. And he was just now realizing which one carried more weight. A soft knock broke my thoughts. I looked up to see Helen from HR. Got a minute? She asked. Come in. She stepped in with a tablet and a glance toward the door. I flagged Brad Jensen's file after your last 2 entries. Want to make it formal? Not yet, I said calmly. We don't fire people for being sloppy twice. But we do watch them closely. Helen nodded slowly, catching the tone. Document everything? Everything, I said. Let him build the case himself. She gave a knowing smile. Anything else? I shook my head. That's all for now. As she turned to leave, I added, make sure his direct supervisor is copied on any project updates going forward. I want accountability across the board. Understood. The door clicked shut behind her, and I leaned back in my chair. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. Not really. It was about structure, integrity, showing Lisa, and more importantly, myself, that dignity didn't have to roar. It could whisper. It could walk into a room and leave everyone guessing. Brad had made his choices. Now, he was learning that consequences don't always come with warning signs. Sometimes they come in silence. Sometimes they come in formality. And sometimes they come in the form of a boss who never raises his voice, but never misses a thing. The doorbell rang just past 8 a.m. Not the usual time for drama. Most mornings in my house were quiet now. Predictable. And I liked it that way. But the sound that came with the bell, that frantic, rhythmic pounding on the door, told me this morning wasn't going to be one of those. I opened the door, and there she was. Lisa. No coat. Hair tangled. Eyes swollen. Tears streaked her face like she'd already lost count of how long she'd been crying. Her blouse was wrinkled, and she looked like she hadn't slept, or eaten, or stopped running in circles long enough to remember how to breathe. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, breathing hard. Then she whispered it like a confession. He left me. I didn't answer. Not at first. She stepped closer, voice cracking like glass under pressure. Jacob, he left. Brad left me. I leaned on the doorframe. Did he pack a bag, or just vanish before breakfast? She blinked, confused. What? I shrugged. It's important. Shows how serious he was. She stared at me, stunned. Is that seriously what you're opening with? I figured you didn't come here for small talk. Her lips trembled. I don't even know why he did it. He just said he couldn't do it anymore. Said the job was getting too hard. That he couldn't handle the pressure. And then, he blamed me. I nodded once. Sounds about right. Lisa stared like she didn't recognize me. You did something. I know you did. You. I didn't make him late, I said calmly. I didn't lose his files. I didn't push him to date someone in a position to complicate everything. Her voice rose. You destroyed him. No. I replied, keeping my voice even. He was already falling. I just stepped out of the way. She stumbled forward, grabbing my arm with both hands. We can fix this, Jacob. Please, this doesn't have to be the end of everything. You and me, we were good once. Don't you remember? I remember being loyal, I said. That's what I remember. I was confused, she breathed. You stopped trying. You were always so calm, so distant. I didn't know where I stood with you. No, I said flatly. You just didn't like standing still. Lisa's grip tightened. You don't have to punish me for this. I lost him. Isn't that enough? I looked her straight in the eyes. No, I said. It's not about him. It's about you realizing you never held the leash. Her voice hitched. I made a mistake. Don't, I snapped, voice low now. Don't try to rewrite it into some tragic accident. You made choices. You flaunted them. You stood in this very room and dared me to react. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. So what, Jacob? You're done with me now? Just like that? I stepped inside, walked to the entry table, and picked up the envelope that had been sitting there untouched for weeks. I held it out. You want closure? I said. Sign the divorce. Her expression shattered. You're actually serious? She whispered. You really want this to end? I already ended it, I said. You're the one still showing up like we're paused instead of finished. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. You're cold. You're heartless. No, I said calmly. I'm free. Lisa stared at the envelope, then at me. Something in her broke. The tears stopped. Her mouth curled into a bitter sneer. Fine, she snapped. You want me to sign it? I'll sign it. But don't think this makes you noble, Jacob. You're still cruel. I stepped aside, letting her walk past me into the hallway. Just focused. She snatched the envelope and turned sharply toward the door again. You're going to regret this, she hissed. I opened the door for her. I doubt it. She left without another word. The wind caught the screen door behind her and slammed it shut. I stood in the quiet that followed. No shaking hands. No second thoughts. Just a strange sense of stillness. Lisa had come looking for rescue. What she got was reality. And the man she thought she had power over? He wasn't hers anymore. The legal office was cold in the way all of them are. Sterile walls, flickering fluorescent lights, a stack of forms thicker than a phone book sitting between us on the conference table. Lisa was already there when I walked in. Hair brushed, lips tinted in a shade she used to wear when she wanted to be noticed. She was wearing the soft blue blouse I always liked, back when I used to notice those things. She smiled like we were old friends meeting for coffee. You're early, she said, her voice light. I'm on time, I replied, sliding into the chair across from her. The lawyer entered moments later, a quiet man with a polite handshake and a folder marked final in bold print. He didn't waste time with small talk. Standard review, he said, placing the paperwork between us. Lisa, these documents confirm you waive all claims to shared property, financial assets, and residual interests tied to Mr. Lane's firm. He slid the pen toward her. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Can I read them first? She asked, even though she already had a copy. The lawyer nodded. Of course. She leafed through the pages slowly. Not reading, just stalling. Then she chuckled. You really kept it all, huh? I didn't answer. She looked up, trying again. You always did love your order. Everything neat. Signed, sealed, labeled. Makes sense that this is how it ends. I looked her in the eyes, expression flat. It ended before this. She blinked, smile faltering for the first time. Jacob, she said gently. We weren't always like this. No, I agreed. Once, I didn't know who you really were. She looked down at the papers again. I just thought maybe we could. She hesitated, then corrected herself. End on a good note. I leaned back. You'll end it how you choose. But I'm already finished. She held my gaze, her lips parting like she might say something more, but then she picked up the pen. No ceremony, no speech, just one signature after another. Her name, mine, the date. She slid the file toward the lawyer with a shaky breath. That's it, she asked. The lawyer nodded. You're officially divorced. You're both free to go. Lisa stood first. She hesitated at the door, looking back at me. You really feel nothing? I stood too. I feel lighter. Then I walked past her, leaving her in the doorway, staring at a version of me she didn't recognize anymore. 2 weeks later, things at the office had settled into a steady rhythm again. The whispers had faded. The sideways glances stopped. Brad showed up on time every morning, clean-shaven, quiet, folders in order, eyes lowered. The cockiness was gone, replaced by something more useful, humility and discipline. At 10:03 a.m., I buzzed his desk. Brad, got a minute? Of course, he said, almost too quickly. He stepped in, shutting the door behind him like it might matter. His expression was controlled, but I could see the tension under the surface, the way his shoulders sat a little too stiff, the way he stood like a man bracing for a verdict. I motioned to the chair. Sit. He obeyed. I folded my hands on the desk, watching him. You've been on time every day for the last 2 weeks. He nodded. Yes, sir. No mistakes. No reports. No drama. No, sir. I paused, then added, since you've been better after Lisa, I'd rather not lose a decent worker. His head lifted slightly, eyes surprised but cautious. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I nodded once, standing up. Keep it that way. Brad stood, too, slower this time. I will. I promise. Good, I said, opening the door. He stepped out, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath the entire meeting. He never asked if I knew how much I'd affected him. He never guessed how calculated it had all been. And I never offered a hint. I watched him return to his desk, a little straighter, a little smaller. Then I turned back into my office and closed the door behind me. The pieces were where they belonged. No shouting, no explosions, just a clean, quiet checkmate. And that was the end of my story. Lisa chose to come back when everything was already broken, and Brad chose to stay quiet when the truth could have changed everything. So here's my question for you. If you were in Brad's shoes, would you have told me the truth about the affair from the start, or kept your head down like he did? Let me know in the comments. And if this story hit something real for you, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's more to come.